It is also my pleasure to introduce to you Nutrien President and CEO, Mr. Ken Seitz. Ken brings over 25 years of global management experience working across more than 60 countries with a deep background in the ag and mining sectors. Ken joined Nutrien in October 2019 as Executive Vice President and CEO Potash, leading the world's largest potash producer with over 20 million tons of capacity at its 6 lower-cost potash mines in Saskatchewan. Before joining Nutrien, he was President and CEO of Canpotex, one of the world's largest suppliers of potash, where he was appointed to the role in 2015. Ken has a Bachelor of Science in Agriculture, a Bachelor of Engineering, and a Master of Business Administration from the University of Saskatchewan. I believe Ken and Sarah are now going to join me on stage. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Kate, and nice job on the pronunciation of Saskatchewan. People don't always get that right, so yeah, thank you for the kind introduction. And thank you to the organizers as well for all of the efforts for pulling this great event together. We know that pulling these things together is a big job, and certainly we appreciate all of the efforts of the team. Also like to thank my fellow speakers for sharing their insights, and each of you who made the priority at this busy time of the year to be here. We do have a big job ahead of us. Early in my career, agriculture was asking the question, how will we feed 6 billion people? Today we have 8 billion people on the planet, and by 2050, our kids will be in these roles, the jobs that we're in today, and it's projected that there will be more than 10 billion people on the planet at that time, all needing more of the crops we use for food, fuel, and for clothing. The goalposts also keep moving, and we need to move faster to keep up. Today, I want to talk about 3 things that we can do as farmers, as an industry, and as policymakers to help feed the world in a sustainable way. Let's start with a look at a few of our shared realities. The Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations estimates that there'll be 10 billion people on the planet, and that today we are living with food insecure people that's growing. And by 2050, with those 10 billion people on the planet, 3 out of 10 people will be hungry, food insecure. Today, that's 2.4 billion people facing moderate or severe food insecurity. And that's likely to intensify as population continues to grow. At the same time, food production is being disrupted by geopolitical events. We know that. Most notably, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and importantly, its recent withdrawal from the Black Sea grain deal. All over the world, growers are being hit with unprecedented weather events, drought, wildfires, and flooding. And we're also faced with supply disruptions caused by supply chain, port delays, and infrastructure challenges. So, fair to say we live in an uncertain world, yet still there is one thing I know for sure, and that is that people like this group gathering in this room have the ability to figure this out. I say this with confidence because I know the character of people in agriculture. I grew up on a dairy farm in Western Canada. I know the dedication farmers bring to their work every day. In Nutrien, I see this story played out around the world. Whether it's growing corn in the US, and I was just talking with Brian from the Iowa Corn Growers Association, whether it's soybeans in Brazil or whether it's rice in Thailand. I also know that a status quo approach to food production will not get us to where we need to be. We cannot just do more of the same things that we already do. We need a new approach to evolving responsibilities for food production and the environment. I firmly believe that farmers hold the key to feeding our growing population. I also know that farmers are committed to growing in a sustainable way. Farmers have always been conservation experts and proud stewards of the land. No one cares more about preserving soil health, conserving natural resources, or limiting fuel consumption than the people who have dedicated their life's work to it. Now, farmers are being asked to produce more while consuming less. In Nutrien, we don't see those things as mutually exclusive goals. We can produce more food and take care of the environment. We can feed a growing planet safely and sustainably. But it will take a commitment from everyone involved, growers, policymakers, and industry leaders, with a focus on 3 priorities. We need to innovate. Our role is to foster the new generation of innovators, to feed the next generation on the planet. We need to collaborate. Anyone involved in agriculture knows it's a multifaceted industry, and we need to work together to find solutions. And we need to accelerate. The population clock is ticking. The environmental clock is ticking. We can't ignore the need for change, so that the time is now. So let's start by discussing innovation. People in agriculture have always been entrepreneurs and innovators. We have made tremendous advances in seed technology and precision tools that unlock yield potential for growers while preserving the environment. We've seen the rise of biotech crops that have built-in defenses against disease and drought. We've embraced the adoption of autonomous tractors, drones, and satellite imagery. There's an entire ecosystem of products that will continue to evolve if we put the right support mechanisms in place. In Nutrien, we see more potential in digital agronomy, AI, and biologicals, all of which can contribute to improved sustainability. We are working to enhance the efficiency of nutrients and to boost on-farm productivity in a way that can help farmers get the most out of every acre while protecting the environment. Agriculture innovation has already demonstrated its ability to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The EPA, with its recently released inventory of U.S. greenhouse gas emissions and sinks, it found that overall U.S. greenhouse gas emissions increased by 5.2% between 2020 and 2021, while agriculture emissions dropped by 0.2% over that period. Our industry, the agriculture industry, was the only tracked category that saw a decrease in emissions over that period. This followed a 2.7% decrease between 2019 and 2020 and a 2.2% decrease between 2018 and 2019. So agriculture has taken up the cause and reduced greenhouse gas emissions. As an industry, we are making progress. The numbers are certainly impressive and encouraging, and we need to build on that with innovation that can improve the bottom line for farmers and ensure the sustainability of the land, which brings me to my second point, and that is collaboration. Transforming the global food system requires cross-sectoral partnerships. We need to be working together to leverage the opportunities in front of us. And farmers will always be at the center of the conversation because farmers know the realities of food production on the ground. It's why I love being in rooms like this, talking to farmers. We get feedback directly through our Nutrien Ag Solutions team, which serves over 500,000 grower accounts worldwide, including more than 350,000 in North America. We have 1,500 retail branches in the US and Canada, and our certified crop advisors spend their days working side by side with growers. Your input helps shape what we do. Now we've teamed up with Tenaris Agriculture in the US Corn Belt to provide our Nutrien Digital Scout technology to growers. This system uses drone imagery and artificial intelligence analytics to detect disease or pest pressure, and our certified crop consultants create custom application plans before larger issues arise. This can save the farmer time and money while preventing yield loss. It's one example of how innovation and collaboration are transforming the global food system. We're using a similar approach with our Farm Smart program, which has Nutrien agronomists working with growers to improve sustainability at the farm gate. FarmSmart makes additional technical expertise available to growers as they work to align with the USDA's Climate Smart program. We use digital tools to create a comprehensive plan and to help farmers track reductions in greenhouse gas emissions, changes in carbon sequestration, and improvements in water quality. The goal is to quantify outcomes and incentivize adoption. For Nutrien, our partners and growers we work with, we're seeing progress, which takes me to the third priority, and that is the need to accelerate change. For this to happen, it is important that policymakers are on board. Growers know they can improve production in a sustainable way. Right now, however, they are held back by risk and at times by red tape. Biological crop protection products are a prime example. Biostimulants act like vitamins to enhance a plant's natural development, but it is a long process to get them into the hands of farmers. In the regulatory world, biological products are often lumped in with synthetic chemistries that take longer to bring to market. We need legislators on this continent to work with growers and industry to find a more common sense approach that can help us meet the targets of productivity and sustainability. Another example is the critical minerals list. Nutrien mines and manufactures an estimated 25 million tons of potash, nitrogen, and phosphate around the world every year. Our products are essential nutrients that enhance crop yields, protect the fertility of the soil, and help farmers meet the global demand for crops used in food, fuel, and clothing. With events in Eastern Europe and supply chain disruptions in North America, recognizing potash and phosphate as critical minerals is a legislative step that will reduce uncertainty related to supply. Making this happen is a necessary step toward protecting the future of food production. So as I wrap up, I want to reinforce the importance of the challenge ahead. If we want to meet the future of demand for food, farmers will need to produce more in the next generation than they have over the past 10,000 years. The world is asking a lot of farmers and of our industry. As I think back of growing up on a farm, and I think about the farmers we work with every day here in the US and around the world, I'm reminded that every time I see a challenge in agriculture, I also see people willing to roll up their sleeves to find a solution. That's what we'll do again. We'll innovate, we'll collaborate, and we'll accelerate the way we transform the global food system. It's what we need to do to feed the future in a sustainable way, and a Nutrien that is at the core of who we are. So thank you for your time, and I look forward to talking with Sarah and taking some of your questions.
Thank you. Want to join me over here? Well, thank you, Ken. It's great to have you here with us, and we're just going to have a little discussion here. I've got a few questions, and then as we've experienced already this morning, please submit your questions on Slido so that we can ask exactly what you want to hear from somebody with all this experience in the, as CEO of Nutrien. And you mentioned some of the volatility already that's going on in around the globe. Talk to us about how the disruption, the Russian invasion of Ukraine has specifically impacted first your business and then your ability to trade and source products around the globe.
Yeah, no, it's really the events taking place in Eastern Europe, and here we are 18 months later, and things continue to unfold, but really struck right at the center of our business. And in a few ways. So obviously, the agricultural complex in both Russia and Ukraine plays an enormous role in growing food for the world. It's one of the bread baskets of the world. 60% of sunflower oil comes out of Ukraine, and 40% of traded wheat exports come out of Russia and Ukraine. So, we could go on and on like that. So just watching the challenges now with obviously the on-again, off-again Black Sea grain deal that Russia has pulled out of, and the inability of the Ukrainians to get product to market, on the ground, the Ukrainian farmer is experiencing extraordinary discounts to what it is that they produce and sell. So as one of the breadbaskets of the world, food shortage, and the Europeans now very, very concerned, obviously, with some of those export nations that received Ukrainian imports, facing food insecurity. And you know what happens when people are hungry? They get uneasy and they migrate. And so all that unfolding as we speak continues to unfold. In the meantime, the world looking to the other breadbaskets of the world to fill that gap. And that's, of course, the US, Canada, Australia, Brazil, places where we have our big presence. So we've been very, very busy in those other breadbaskets of the world as we've watched some volatility in commodities. But then layer on the fact that Russia and Belarus produce 40% of the world's traded potash. I mean, it's just an extraordinary number. And as we've seen over the last 18 months, all the volatility in potassium prices related to that conflict and the challenges that Russia and Belarus have had getting to export markets, and now rewriting of trade routes we see as the Belarusians, for example, are finding unnatural and very expensive outlets into China and India, but that product is flowing. And so these trade routes are really disrupting the trade flows that we have all become accustomed to over the last 40 years. And that's creating volatility and certainly supply shortages in some parts of the world. And that will continue to play out as well, especially as we believe that the Russians and the Belarusians will have a difficult time getting equipment, Western equipment, to run their mines. And then finally, if that wasn't enough, the European nitrogen plants use Russian natural gas as feedstock. And so the natural gas prices in Europe have lent to extraordinarily high cost nitrogen production in that part of the world. And we've seen anywhere from a third of those plants to half of those plants shut in since this war started. And that's a part of the world that produces 15% of the world's nitrogen. So it's really, like I say, kind of it's a perfect storm of events for agriculture, global agriculture, but certainly for crop inputs as well. For our part at Nutrien, we've ramped up our potash production in Canada. We're a big producer to this part of the world, and through our Nutrien Ag Solutions platform, we want to make sure that our grower customers continue to get the crop nutrients they need. That's true for our nitrogen fleet as well and our phosphate fleet as well. So we have, like I say, we've expanded production and now continuing to work with our customers to make sure they get what they need.
And do you see, in terms of the global food supply, we know that a lot of the production that came out of Ukraine was moving to parts of Africa and areas where there's a significant population that's either lacking food altogether or having reduced amount of nutrients. How do you see some of this playing out on the global stage in terms of trying to restock products that might be moving in those directions?
Yeah, it really is. It has become, tragically, the weaponization of food, where obviously the Russians have halted any grain movement through the Black Sea and not escorting any vessels through the Black Sea, but yet selectively sending vessels with grain to, as you say, Sarah, some African nations who they want to endear themselves to. So it is, like I say, the weaponization of food. How this plays out, it really is going to have to be the unlocking of Ukrainian agriculture. I mean, Ukrainian farmer has really done some extraordinary things over the last 30 years in terms of their own productivity and their own technological improvements. They're great farmers. It really is going to have to be about unlocking, that production to get to other parts of the world. Otherwise, I fear that, as we're calling it today, the Global South, who is experiencing the brunt of climate, is also experiencing, these food insecurity challenges. And I think it's fair to say that the EU is really, really, staring at this big challenge because of this migration issue. But, how this plays out, Sarah, I think it's going to be very bumpy and it's going to be very volatile.
Well, and it's certainly not the only challenge you face. Obviously, that's one that we can't predict with any level of certainty of what's going to happen with Vladimir Putin. And so in addition to that, as you look at kind of your footprint and how you need to move products, it seems like there's probably a pretty long list of things that you have to make sure are working correctly. You've got the climate challenges and severe weather in some parts of the country and the world. We've experienced high inflation. We have logistical challenges right now, low levels in the Mississippi and Panama Canal. Talk to us a little bit about how you even, when you get up in the day, how does Ken rank those challenges? And then we can talk a little bit about some of the workarounds for those.
Yeah, I keep, waking up in the morning and talking to our team and saying, locusts and floods and fires and plague. And, these are, it's extraordinary the number of challenges that we're facing. But for our part, priority for us is the safety of our people. So that's the thing in terms of priority and the thing that keeps me up at night the most. It's keeping, the 30,000 people that we employ safe and who are either out on the farm working with growers, or they're in a mine, or they're in a chemical plant, or back in the office. So safety is top priority, but beyond safety, Sarah, as you say, we have been very deliberate now over the last 40 years building our supply chain, the most developed of which is here in the U.S., here in this country, where on this continent, our 1,500 retail locations, and behind that we have about 500 of our own managed warehouses, trains, trucks, and right back to the plant gate. So today, while global agriculture is certainly experiencing supply chain challenges, we have done all right. We've done all right because we've made those investments in like I say, in the infrastructure, and we've taken under control the things that we can take under control to make sure our customers are getting what they need. I would say another big challenge at the moment, I think everyone can agree, is this inflationary environment that we're experiencing, and so much of what we produce exists in the commodity space, farmers are feeling this obviously on their farms, whether it's equipment or fuel or fertilizer. I mean, like I say, this inflationary environment has really been a challenge for us. And so, the things that we're doing is obviously getting our costs down to the extent we can get our costs down. And that's deploying technology in the name of productivity and making sure that supply chain is as efficient as it can be. The last one I think I'll talk about in terms of the list of challenges. So I said safety, I said supply chain, I said inflation. People talk about it a lot. Is talent, the capability to have the people and attract the people that, like I say, the 30,000 people we have to do this every day and serve our customers. That continues to be a challenge for us, and it really is, just as looking at unemployment rates, but then looking at agriculture itself and attracting young people into this industry. And we're now doing a lot of work, right at the elementary schools and the high schools to tell people about some of the challenges that the industry faces and some of the extraordinary opportunities that exist in the things I mentioned in my remarks about yield and sustainability. So talent is one we have to take a long-term view, but that probably is one that's also a big challenge for us.
Yeah, I think we could safely say that's across all of agriculture and pretty much across the U.S. economy right now, trying to find the right people who want to work in the right places where they're needed. Since you mentioned pricing and availability, can I give us your crystal ball for what we might see in terms of those two factors with nutrients as we head into the fall and spring?
Yeah, it was just an extraordinary 18 months in terms of the volatility of crop nutrient pricing. And, if you're a farmer, you would have felt that over the last 18 months. And it really was owing to this terrible war in Eastern Europe starts. And the reaction from many, on the planet, and this happened in Brazil in a really substantial way, is concerns about supply shortage. And so, the growers of the world really stepped into the market and secured supply, which ran prices up. This was 2021, and at the onset, or 2022, at the onset of the conflict. And over the course of 2022, and with the cold planting season here in the U.S., we saw those inventories build, but carry over into the fall. And so with carryover volumes and some of these inventories having been built on the planet, we watched those inventories come down. And as those inventories came down, farmers watched the prices falling and didn't step into the market, not wanting to create an inflection point. And in Brazil, the farmers are still staying out of the market until they're just in their safrinha planting right now, their corn planting season, and their soybean planting season. And as they draw down, they're going to have to step back in the market, but they have not re-engaged with the market. So we saw all this fly up in prices, all this softening in prices. Now, I would say that on this continent, I'd like to think that prices have stabilized and that we're looking at, I think, a pretty open fall application season here in this country, and we're watching sort of normal buying patterns and normal inventories here in the U.S. And so as we head into the fall, like I say, I'd like to think that things have stabilized. The only caveat to that would be that I don't think the supply challenges out of Eastern Europe, that hasn't played out fully yet. So, while it is the case that things have stabilized here on this continent, I think globally, normal potash demand, for example, in any given year is about 71 million tons. Last year, the world applied 63 million tons. So as global demand picks up again and farmers start getting potash back on the land, we could experience some additional tightness. So things have stabilized. I hope that that's true. Frankly, we like stable markets, but given some of the challenges in Eastern Europe, we could continue to see some volatility as well.
So one of the things that has come in from our audience is that looking at the longer term view too, do you see more or less nitrogen applications going forward, say in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, I would say globally, right now we would say that crop nutrients play a role in producing half of the world's food. So that means that the other half is not being fertilized at the moment, and that the world habitually underutilizes crop nutrients and then, as a path to greater yields. So, and we've watched it now. We've watched, obviously, US, Canada, Australia. These are the most sophisticated agricultural markets in the world. And, obviously, soil sampling now and variable rate technology, those markets are using appropriate crop nutrients in the name of yield. And now, of course, sustainability. But if you go to a place like Brazil, if you look at the productivity increases over the last 20 years, it really has been about balanced fertilization. But I would also say we know application rates in parts of Brazil are low. But then we can go to other parts of the world. You can go to India, where there's 100 million farmers, and each are on 3 hectares of land, and crop nutrients are habitually underutilized. So I would say if you take a global view, crop nutrient use is going to continue to increase in the name of yield.
Another question that came in has to do with some of the reshoring efforts that the Biden administration has been focused on. There's been grants out of USDA looking at how much more capacity can be built within the U.S. What's practical?
In terms of
U.S. Reshoring or bringing in more capacity?
Yeah, the reality is that phosphate and potash are natural resources buried in the ground. So you only have the luxury of developing that production in parts of the world that host it. Canada there's 3 potash basins in the world, geologic basins. One is in Belarus, one is in Russia, and one's in Canada. And I think that for our customers and for the people in U.S. agriculture, can certainly take comfort that your friends to the north there have a couple hundred years worth of potash that we're going to continue to supply into this part of the world. And this market is by far our biggest market and by far our most important. So potash production, I think that, like I say, I think the North American farmer can take some comfort there. Potassium production, as you know, with the countervailing duty discussion and on Moroccan imports and all those good things, a little different. And so, while there is some U.S. resources, it's higher cost, as you know. And so that's going to continue to be a traded commodity, I think, with all of the offshore challenges that may or may not exist. Those risks, I would say. But, just developing phosphate production in the U.S. is going to be hard. And then nitrogen, We can certainly develop nitrogen plants anywhere that you have a natural gas source, or, as the world evolves now, looking to other renewable technologies to produce nitrogen. I think that as the world looks to decarbonize, both from a Scope 1, Scope 2 point of view, nitrogen production, and then on the farm as well, the transition from what we call gray ammonia to blue ammonia to clean ammonia to green ammonia, that's going to take place. And actually, I dare say with the Inflation Reduction Act here in the U.S., a lot of that's going to happen here. So I think that from nitrogen production domestically, this continent's going to be just fine.
If you had your version of a regulatory glide path for your products in this country, obviously we heard from Rod, we've heard from others talking about the fact that this regulatory structure is sometimes our friend and sometimes makes life a little bit more difficult. But from your perspective, what would you like to see in terms of a regulatory glide path? And I know that could cover a lot of different things, but you mentioned biologicals earlier in your comments.
Yeah, biologicals I use as an example, which really has to go through the synthetic chemistry approvals process. And, as Nutrien, we have our own proprietary brand of seed chemistry and crop nutrients called Loveland Products, and we really are expanding our biologicals business now because, one is that when we noticed, obviously, when fertilizer prices are really quite high, growers are more inclined to try out the biological solutions. And so we saw that over the last 18 months, and so we continue to invest and grow that business. From a regulatory point of view, we're not looking to cut any corners, and certainly we want to make sure that everything we're doing is safe for the planet, safe for consumers, safe for farmers, all those good things. It really is, and this is maybe just a high-level answer, it really is, though, one, trying to recognize what we're solving for here, and so recognizing or characterizing the challenges or risks that any product might be posing, and then getting it into the right approval stream. Then two, for that approval stream, making sure that that's efficient and that it's streamlined, and that really, for our part, and I would say this is true for whether we're trying to get a mine approved for a development or a nitrogen facility, potash facility, or a product, it's really having one face to talk to as well. I mean, there are just so many stakeholders that we are satisfying. There's so much overlap between government agencies, and I'm not just talking about in this country, I'm talking about everywhere we operate, that we're often trying to obviously work with sort of this web of stakeholders with so much overlap. Some of the time, those stakeholders actually have competing agendas, and so navigating the regulatory environment with all of these stakeholders, as opposed to sort of having, one regulator to talk to, there's a real opportunity there as well.
Efficiency and government regulation don't always go hand in hand.
Yeah, I think that's every corner of the planet. That is true. That is a challenge. Yeah.
So you've mentioned before things about a grower-centric ecosystem that you're trying to develop and the importance of the farmers. Tell us, what does that look like?
Yeah, so I grew up in a farming community, like I said, I grew up on a dairy farm, and all the people that I grew up with are back in my home community farming and doing all the work in the name of yield, in the name of sustainability. But it really is looking at those farmers and recognizing that this is their farm, this is their livelihood. Some of these farms passed down for generations, certainly mine was. All European immigrants in this part of the world that I grew up in, their farm, their livelihoods, their family, their legacy, their production. And as the world faces some of the uncertainty and challenges related to food production, but now sustainability, providing that farmer with the tools, and actually getting the feedback from the farmer, but providing with the tools where that farm can continue to grow, prosper, and stay in the family heritage and meet the world, the needs of the world as it relates to yield. So what does that look like? Well, for our Nutrien Ag Solutions business, we're now working, like I say, we have 4,000 agronomists and crop consultants, certified crop consultants working on the farm. And they're there weekly, daily, providing advice, digitally enabled advice now on not just scripting that's going to lend to increased yields or maximize yields, but now in the sustainability. And so we have our own seed products now, Loveland products, where, for specialty crops, those are technologies that we've evolved ourselves in the name of disease resistance and yield and ultimately, the pocketbook of the farmer. We're also providing our own chemistries now, and we're also, of course, working with the biggest seed and chemistry providers on the planet. We'd be some of their biggest customers. So channeling that appropriately through to the farmer with digitally enabled agronomy. We're also, obviously, the world's largest, by some measure, the world's largest producer of fertilizer. We're working with the farmer on not just provision of more fertilizer is better, but now soil sampling. We have the largest soil sampling capability in the US with our Waypoint Labs soil sampling. We're the largest partner of John Deere on our variable rate inputs and, for our stewardship on the land and our own crop nutritional proprietary products as well. And also now working on our slow release nitrogen fertilizers, which it's a granule, it's polymer coated, and only releases nitrogen into the plant root as it needs it, avoiding volatilization in the atmosphere as a source of greenhouse gases. So stuffing the channel with products and services for the grower, and now growing our Nutrien financial business. It's our own financing captive where we can help the farmer, finance all this, which we know credit in agriculture is critical as farmers take all that risk and put the crop in the ground. So Nutrien Financial as well. And then I mentioned earlier the biologicals discussion. So it really is about creating that ecosystem around the grower, allows them to focus on what they're good at, stewards of the land, environment, now climate, and fixation of carbon in the soil, sequestration, and of course yield. Letting farmers do what they're best at, and us helping to create that ecosystem around them. And again, of course, receiving feedback from farmers on what works and what doesn't work, because no one knows better than the farmer.
So last question for you. This is one from the audience. I'll combine a couple actually in this question, but there's one of your 3 key points was collaboration. And historically, farmers have been pretty private about their data. And there's also now the competitiveness involved with who's going to get funds for different practices. How do you see encouragement or incentivizing collaboration going forward between all these diverse sectors of agriculture in the U.S.?
Yeah, I go back home and talk to farmers in our community, and so it's a Canadian context versus U.S. context, but I really think that in order for farmers to take on all that risk on the acre, and what do I mean risk? Introducing some new practices on the acre as it relates to, we've got our carbon pilot. We have about 1 million acres under management here in the U.S., mostly in the U.S. now, where cover cropping, our slow release nitrogen fertilizers, soil sampling, variable rate technology, we are producing a high quality carbon credit for the grower, and actually we're buying that off of them. And we call it a pilot because, of course, there's not really a value to carbon at the moment. In other words, there's really no incentive, I would say, for the farmer to start adopting some of these things. And so, and we're showing on that acre through our carbon pilot, we actually can help improve yields by the appropriate scripting with the grower and these sustainability outcomes. But again, this is some new things, and I would say that for my home community there, I talked to those customers of ours, and I don't think there's going to be a lot of uptake unless there's some incentive. So I think, yeah, we're all protective of our own data unless there's some incentive that comes along that makes us less protective. I think that that's one. I think so that's on the farm, and data stewardship and data management and all those things are going to have to evolve as well, because I think farmers are going to want to understand that if there is a provision of data, that's safe and protected data, and that's a big challenge as well. At the corporate level, You know, some of the things, and this is difficult for corporations, for companies like Nutrien, but we have to, I think, acknowledge that some of our traditional beliefs about value and value capture and doing things on our own, and this is in the sustainability front, that we're going to have to get together and collaborate and think differently about how we're going to all make money at this and who gets their share of the prize. You know, because there is a business case for sustainability, that's true. At Nutrien, we're proving that out. But as we collaborate with Pepsi and Maple Leaf Foods and Bunge and all these upstream and downstream customers, upstream and downstream of the acre on the farm, it is thinking differently about the value pools and who gets what. And that has yet to play out. I think the starting point is there is a business case for sustainability, but again, now thinking less sort of traditionally about those value pools and who gets what, recognizing value of carbon will come along at some point and recognizing that we have a global challenge to solve here.
Thank you, Ken, for all your valuable insights. We appreciate you being with us here today.
Thank you, Sarah.
Please give him a round of applause.